And this was announced on Tuesday that Sycho Sid Vicious will be inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame class of 2026 as part of its legacy class. Finally, the only men left to have held the Winged Eagle belt to not be in the Hall of Fame will finally take his rightful place. I always thought that was very weird, that every person who had held that championship was in except him. But we actually got two names this week that are going in. I will get to the other one here in a little bit. But again, yet another name that I was hoping to see go in when they were still alive, and I know they were hoping for it as well, but then he passes away. And then he gets in. Hence why this is being relegated to the legacy class. In the past, when you are inducted into the legacy class, which they first introduced 10 years ago, there's no fanfare or speeches from loved ones or anything like that. They just sort of announce you. Last year, Kamala, Dory Funk Sr., and Ivan Koloff were the legacy inductees, and they at least aired video packages for them, and they showed their family members in the audience. You know, they would stand up and they would wave. So, I mean, it's better than it was when they first started doing it. But not long before he died, Sid said he was hopeful of going in now that Vince McMahon was gone, because he thought that made an induction more likely. Vince not being around anymore, I guess the two of them just, they didn't get along at various points very well. So he was expecting and hoping that that might clear the way for him to get in. Sid's oldest son, Frank, said, "Congratulations to the master and ruler of the world. Grateful for the recognition by WWE inducting my dad into the Hall of Fame. He deserves this, and I wish he was here to be a part of the celebration. I love and miss you, Dad." His younger brother, Gunner, said this, "It's official. My father, Sycho Sid Vicious, is going into the WWE Hall of Fame. The master and ruler of the world is finally getting his flowers. Proud to be his son and to carry that legacy forward. The Hall of Fame just got a whole lot more vicious." Gunner, by the way, is planning a memorial show in his father's honor on August 29th in West Memphis, Arkansas, called the Sycho Sid Memorial Benefit Show, with 100% of the proceeds going straight to local animal shelters. I guess Sid was a big animal lover, so that is a cool thing they're doing. Gunner is the one who broke the news on Facebook a couple of years ago that his father had passed away after battling cancer for several years. And at the time, he said that his dad was diagnosed with congestive heart failure in 2016 and AFib around the same time. And he was also given a pacemaker. And then in April of 2021, he was diagnosed with stage 4 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, which was linked to Roundup weed killer, he said. So he wasn't just battling stage 4 cancer. He apparently had also gotten COVID as well, which is what led to his death. But Sid had not told anybody, not publicly anyway, about his cancer. He was still making appearances, pretty much up until he died. If you just look at Sid, he was the perfect pro wrestler. Like if I was creating a wrestler in 2K26, I would want him to look like Sid. Or if I had the option of choosing someone who looked like Sid, that's the person I would gravitate to. Right? He was the master of the power bomb. Great promo, even when he, would have a bad promo. It was so bad it was good. You were always entertained at least. And he was over everywhere he went. Didn't matter if it was Memphis. It didn't matter if it was WCW, WWE, ECW. He can go around on the independent scene. It did not matter. He was over everywhere he went. 2-time WWE champion, 2-time WCW champion, a member of the Four Horsemen at one time to help combat RoboCop. Yes, RoboCop. And the only 2 WrestleManias that he ever worked, he main evented both shows. One against Hulk Hogan and the other against The Undertaker. Now, I had the chance to meet the man once in 1996. Not long after he won the world title from Shawn Michaels, he did a signing at Funtime USA. Yes, the same Funtime where Crash Holly went down the super slide. Funtime's been gone a long time. Now it's a storage facility. But when he showed up for that signing and he pulled that Winged Eagle belt out of that black velvet bag, I was so tempted to grab it and run. I'm telling you, my intrusive thoughts were almost getting the better of me. But, the man was 6'9", 313 pounds. I don't think that would have been a wise move. But I was tempted. I would have been like Crash. I would have they're going to be chasing me through the ball pit. But the man was going to be a crop duster on a farm until he met Randy Savage at the gym one day, and the rest is history. Hey, you want to be a wrestler? And the rest is history. I've talked about him being one of two names that Antonio Inoki considered for the Big Van Vader gimmick. It was Sid and the Warrior. I think he wanted the Warrior first. Then it was Sid, and then ultimately it went to Leon White. But he came to the WWF as Sid Justice. He was part of the finish to the greatest Royal Rumble match of all time. They really thought that the fans would boo Sid when he dumped Hogan out of that ring. He was gone about a month after his WrestleMania match with Hogan. Now, there's two theories or scenarios that have been pitched. Either he quit over a failed drug test. A failed drug test, by the way, that goes back before WrestleMania. But they allowed him to work WrestleMania, and then evidently the subsequent European tour. I mean, that's a little weird. You know, if he had failed the drug test and he was going to be suspended for it, you would think that you would suspend him right away, or at least immediately after WrestleMania. Like, get through WrestleMania and then take whatever action you're going to take. But they didn't. But supposedly they had confronted him about it. Maybe they were going to suspend him, and he walked out. Or, to hear Sid tell it, it was after a disagreement with the Ultimate Warrior before a match. He did the match, and then after he packed his bag and he walked out. But he ended up back in WCW, and he was supposed to beat Vader to win the world title at Starrcade in 1993. But then came one of the more famous incidents in wrestling history, where we nearly had two murders. The scissors incident overseas with Arn Anderson. And I know I've talked about this a few times over the years. It is one of the crazier stories in wrestling history. Sid was at the hotel bar, as was Arn. So I'm sure, there are probably a few, at least beers, if not cocktails in. And Sid made a comment about why he felt the company wasn't drawing. And he said it was because of old guys like Ric Flair. They won't step aside. And Arn's version is that Sid was bragging about holding up the company for a big pay raise. And he was talking about how all these old fuckers need to retire. Meanwhile, Arn had just taken a $100,000 pay cut the year before. And so it rubbed him the wrong way. So the two of them had words. Either Arn threw a beer at Sid or Sid threw a beer at Arn. Everybody got broken up. Everybody got sent back to their rooms. Too Cold Scorpio is in his room, and he hears a commotion outside. It's actually from downstairs. So that's how loud they were. He could hear them from downstairs. So he goes out, and he finds the hallway covered in blood. Like blood all over the walls. And Sid is standing over Arn with a pair of scissors in his hand that belonged to Arn. Apparently, Arn was using them to trim his beard. Sid is the one who came to his room because they had gotten broken up and everything was like, okay, everybody go calm down. And I guess the more Sid thought about it, he got even angrier. So according to what Sid has said in the past, he broke a chair leg off from a chair in his room. He went to go find Arn. He was banging on the door. Arn, I don't know if Arn was probably drunk, but that's where the scissors came from. So when he opened the door, Arn had the scissors and everything just went to shit. But Sid looks down and he sees a hole in his stomach and there's blood squirting out. So at this point, Vader wakes up. He comes out of his room in his underwear and he finds Sid with blood pouring out of his stomach. So he does the only thing that he can think to do. He takes his thumb and he sticks his thumb in the hole to stop the bleeding. Scorpio saved Arn Anderson's life. Vader saved Sid's, is basically what happened here. And neither man pressed charges on the other. They were heading home anyway, from the UK. Arn suffered 20 stab wounds all over his body. Sid was stabbed 4 times, almost bled to death. I mean, they were both lucky to be alive. And Sid got fired over the incident because a lot of wrestlers had threatened to quit if he wasn't. And with that, he pissed away a $600,000 contract per year and a world title run. And Arn got suspended over the incident. So, I mean, neither man was innocent in all this, but that tells you who they held responsible for what happened. And also that Arn had friends that Sid did not. But Sid kept finding work because he was, again, over everywhere he went. So even though he had left previously on bad terms, even after he nearly killed Arn Anderson, Vince brought him back. In 1995, he was the bodyguard for Shawn Michaels. He turned on Michaels. He ended up wrestling Diesel for the world title a few times. And he ended up joining Ted DiBiase's $1 Million Corporation for what I would say was the lamest run of his career. And then he sort of fizzled out. But then they brought him back again. They brought him back again. I want to say that run, God, had to be... It was either the end of 95 or very beginning of 96. Because they did that Raw Bowl, I think the first Raw of 1996. And I want to say Sid was in that match. So he stuck around at least until then, and then just sort of disappeared. But it was 6 or 7 months later. It was the summer of 96. They brought him back again after they fired the Ultimate Warrior because who the fuck didn't see that coming? Vince McMahon, apparently. And this is where Sid caught fire with the fans. For whatever reason, there was something about this particular run. Even though he was always over, he was never over at this level in WWE. And he just caught fire. And the original plan was for Shawn Michaels to drop the world title to Vader at Survivor Series. Shawn didn't want to work with him. So Sid got the spot instead. And in Madison Square Garden that night, Sid had the best match of his career. And they were not expecting the crowd to react in the way that they did, but they cheered wildly for Sid. And they booed Shawn Michaels. To the point where Vince McMahon, at one point, I forgot who told this story, but Vince McMahon got up from the announce desk because he was calling the show. He got up from the announce desk, he took his headset off, and he just looked around in disbelief with this bewildered look on his face. That's how caught off guard he was by the reaction to Sid and the boos for Michaels. And they cheered when Sid won the title, except for that one girl who screamed no, like Darth Vader. He dropped the belt back to Shawn at the Royal Rumble, and he was scheduled to win it back from him again on Raw a few weeks later when Vince had changed his mind about what the original plan was for WrestleMania. Business was not great. Business was not great. And I don't think it's fair to just blame Shawn Michaels for it. Well, he's the champion, and so you got to put the blame on him. He gets some of the blame, but business was just not great. And Vince had fallen back on his tried and true, which is we have to have some big men in the main event of WrestleMania, the big man fetish. And so the plan was to have Sid win the belt back and then defend the championship against The Undertaker. Shawn Michaels would wrestle Bret Hart underneath in a non-title match. So instead, Shawn famously lost his smile, and he vacated the belt instead of putting Sid over again. So the new plan was to put the belt up in a four-way match, and this is back before triple threats and fatal four-ways were a thing, at least on TV. They did not do them. Bret won the belt. 24 hours later on Raw, he dropped the belt to Sid. So Vince got his big man main event that year at WrestleMania, and Bret Hart went on to have maybe the greatest WrestleMania match of all time with Stone Cold Steve Austin. So it all worked out the way it was supposed to. Sid remains and will forever remain the only man to beat Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels to win world titles. Little trivia nugget for you. So then Sid ended up in ECW a couple of years later, and he was just, my God, I mean, everywhere he went, they went nuts for him. I think he had, who'd they put with him? Judge Jeff Jones was his manager for a time. He would introduce him, Sid would come out, he was in the jeans, and the ECW crowd, which again, ECW was like counterculture to WWF and WCW. Those guys suck. Right? This is real wrestling. This is hardcore wrestling. And the minute they get like a big mainstream star from one of the big two promotions, he's the most over person in the entire company. It's just hilarious. And why not? Because he's a big dude who comes out and power bombs people. Like, what's not to love? Paul Heyman knew how to use him. He wasn't there for very long, but he would show up unannounced and he would power bomb a bunch of guys and he would leave. And, when he left there, he went back to WCW. He won the WCW world title twice. The thing I remember most was, there's two things. The injury, of course, is one, but gotta mention the feud with Goldberg and the shot of him standing on top of what used to be his rental car, which was crushed, presumably by Goldberg, into a pancake. And there's Sid standing on top of all the twisted metal, screaming Goldberg at the top of his lungs, looking up at the heavens like William Shatner in The Wrath of Khan. And Mattel actually made a Sid figure to replicate that moment. It's part of their Monday Night Wars line, right down to the duffel bag accessory that Sid was carrying. I'm seriously considering buying it. Like, it's just such an oddly specific moment that I feel like it's just something I need to have. But then came the end of his run, and the most horrific injury that I have ever witnessed in a wrestling ring. At the WCW Sin pay-per-view, January 2001, it was a 4 corners match for the title. Sid, Scott Steiner, Jeff Jarrett, and Road Warrior Animal, who I don't believe was announced. I think it might have been a mystery slot that was open. Sid comes off the middle rope, which is something that he never usually did, because why the fuck would he? 6'9", 313, he doesn't have to be coming off the ropes. But when he landed, his leg snapped in half. And he fractured his tibia and his fibula. Sid blamed John Laurinaitis for making him do the spot. Laurinaitis worked behind the scenes for WCW at the time. And the idea was he would come off the middle rope and give Steiner a high knee. Sid was not comfortable doing this. He tried to get it changed. I always look back at this and go, man, he was a big enough name that if I were him and I felt unsafe about doing something, I would have just told him to fuck off. But I guess he needed the money. So he had to do what he was told. And it didn't matter how uncomfortable he was. He tried to get it changed. And he says Laurinaitis insisted on it. Probably because that spot was to set up Animal, Laurinaitis' brother, coming into the match as a surprise. Nepotism. Nepotism is what snapped Sid's leg. And that injury effectively ended his career. He did eventually come back. He wrestled again years later on the Indies. WWE brought him in for a match against Heath Slater in the build-up to Raw 1000. But that was it. That was the last time on like a main national stage that he was seen by anybody. So what got Sid over was not his technical ability. It wasn't his long list of 5-star matches. It was his size. It was his look, his intensity, his charisma. That's what made him a star. And if Sid came along today and they let him be Sid, I have no doubt that he would have gotten over today too, just like he did every other time. Maybe in spite of the booking, but the fans would have gravitated towards the guy even if the creative team did not. The greatest softball player to ever be inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame, Sycho Sid.